Hi, this is Terry. Welcome to Snowdrops Sunsets. I want to do a video today about about the relationship with other people and when is best to include other people in the healing process. So when is a good time to reach out and ask for support, and when is a good time, I mean obviously it's up to you in your life, but just from my experiences, when is a good time to listen to advice and basically how to figure out whether the advice that you're getting is coming from a place of healing and support and when it's not helpful. And I wanted to do a video around that. So obviously a lot of the videos I'm doing is around following your own intuition on a healing path. Being able to use that intuition to find natural ways of overcoming trauma and the symptoms of trauma. Trying to taking responsibility for finding ways to manage the symptoms of trauma in our lives. But one of the most difficult aspects of all of this is dealing with other people and our relationships. And obviously there's different, like I say, types of trauma and things, and they affect people in different ways. But generally, as a rule, if somebody is really struggling with trauma, they obviously call it these days PTSD or CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress disorder or complex post-traumatic stress disorder. They can also evolve into personality disorders. There's several personality disorders, which is essentially, I think, what psychology is saying, when people get stuck in that and their whole persona and life changes. So I'm talking like about a progression that for me happens because in the initial stages of dealing with trauma, the person hasn't had the support for and being able to find the skills to manage the symptoms of that, and it kind of evolves into a much more serious and complex issue to deal with. It's kind of what happened for me. It's all happened subconsciously, because partly because of my condition, I'd been taught, just to suppress emotions, get on with your life, move forward, all this wonderful advice that other people give you. And then there was a long period when I was really struggling with the symptoms, and I really wanted somebody to save me, help me, find some quick fix. And in those periods, I think I was, stuck in kind of victim mentality, and although I wanted a fix, I didn't think I was able to do that for myself. And when you're in that mentality, it can cause conflict. And when you are suffering from symptoms and you're reactive and to external situations, it can cause issues in other people's lives. So it's a really complex beast, and I'm no expert, I'm not a medical professional or anything like that. I'm just a person who's had experience with this and has had to spend a lot of time unpacking it all and to try and understand it to be able to become more in alignment in my life. So I'm just talking from personal experience and how I managed to navigate that. So let's start at the beginning. Well, not at the beginning, but we'll start with self, I think. When trauma happens to us, there's a lot of complexity, like I say, around it, and especially in the self-help arena industry. There's all these ideas around law of attraction and obviously our subconscious patterns and behaviours that mean that things happen to us because of our behaviours, our thoughts, our attitudes, our ideas of life, and because of our responses to the stimulus. But for me, it was difficult because for a lot of that, I felt like victim blaming, and it's an ugly beast, is victim blaming, because although yes, we are able to take responsibility for ourselves and we can heal ourselves, one, that's not easy. Two, when you've been living in a trauma cycle, or if you've had a traumatic childhood, or you've been groomed by abuse, that is almost impossible. You're asking somebody to unbrainwash themselves. And yes, I do think that law of attraction and that, type of energy exists, but it's way more complex than what is presented. So the answer to law of attraction is not, well, I just have the happy thoughts. No, that's not how it happens. And it's this kind of momentum that's building around the idea that if somebody is dramatic, drama queens, and it's quite vindictive the way that's called, like, are there, or drama, or toxic people. That's another, phrase I've heard a lot. For me, no person is born or lives in that state for no reason. Simple as. People can become, yes, very twisted, very warped by life, even violent and aggressive. But most of the time, and I mean like 90% of the time, I think, I do think there is a slight percentage of people, as in everything in nature, that are just born to be sadistic predators as humans. I just genuinely do. But I don't think that's a high amount at all. I think it's like maybe 1 or 2% of the population, at the most 10. If it was something like 10%, I think we'd be all dead. Anyway, I don't want to go off on one, but I think most of the bad behaviour, toxic behaviour, patterns and cycles of abuse that people perpetrate is through their fear and their biological responses, and they're conditioned. Not everybody's universe is the same. We all have different experiences in life. So actually, if you've been born and brought up in a very abusive environment, then the world is a very dangerous place. And your brain then responds by trying to see and pick out all the dangers around you. So essentially, it's trying to protect you, it's trying to keep you safe. So it does ultimately come from a place of love, self-love, but it's not manifesting that way in the world. And when you're in that, it's not a pleasant place to be. Like, people who are angry and aggressive and are having these big symptoms of PTSD or CPTSD, they might come across as really aggressive and assertive, but that is not that's not a pleasant place to be. That person is literally, having a physiological response. I've talked about before, like, the trauma and the triggers are literally energy stored in our body, and they can't really control with ease a level of explosive, response that they have. And obviously, the longer this goes on, the more triggers you have. So you become more reactive to more and more and more situations, because every time the person reacts, every time, when I had trauma, every time I reacted, it was causing another trauma, something else, another horrible situation probably played out. I probably hurt somebody I cared about, or they had hurt me and I didn't know how to, discuss it. And it just keeps attracting more and more awful situations. And because you get used to that, you then think that's just normal, that's just life, and you put yourself into more and more situations where more traumatic events might happen. So it is a cycle. I call it a trauma cycle because it just perpetuates. And I understand that potentially from an outsider's point of view, I mean, I have, family members who have had very similar symptoms to me, and I have to then have relationships with them, and I've been on the other end of somebody else's really aggressive triggers, and I know how awful it is, and I know how it can be draining and exhausting, and you just want it to stop, and you think you have to separate from that person. And yes, there's lines. We need to set boundaries with people. But what I kind of have found so difficult for my journey, and just what I see going on in the world at the minute, is this like victim blaming. Like, it's not somebody's fault that they were traumatized. It's not just a case of, just change how you think, just feel better. It's not that simple. It's complex. And we can't control the triggers. You can't control how the triggers make you respond. So actually blaming somebody who's been traumatized for their trauma symptoms is re-traumatizing them, and you're perpetuating the cycle. And that is really damaging, really damaging. And I understand the need, if somebody has not been through that, or if somebody even is going through their own trauma, to set boundaries. Yes, I'm not saying, you know, put yourself in situations where you make yourself unsafe, but it should come from a place of, I need to keep myself safe and I want the best for this relationship and this person, so I'm going to put a bit of space and, you know, support them potentially from afar. Or you don't even have to support other people, you know, it's not, I'm not saying that, but to then blame them for the symptoms, it's, I don't know, it's like, I'm trying to think of a physical health. We don't blame people for getting Alzheimer's. We don't blame people for getting cancer, yet they have caused that themselves. You know, in this complex law of attraction universe that we live in, and because of the things I'm talking about, we essentially do cause every symptom of unrest that comes out in our lives. But we don't, in our culture, generally blame people with what we would consider, you know, like a physical problem for their symptoms. But we do when it's psychological, when it's someone stuck in a psychological trauma cycle. There are points, obviously, when if a person's not fully taking responsibility for the healing, then yes, they can get caught in a victim cycle, and that's not healthy. It's also, you know, it can be very destructive to them and the people around them, and it's not a nice place to get stuck in. I don't think people genuinely want to be stuck in them places. And this is when I would say is a good point to seek out professional help if you can, if it's available to you. If you can see that you're stuck in a victim cycle and you literally feel powerless and you feel like you can't get out, it's a good idea to reach out and try and find some support, because potentially that is your brainwashing, that's your conditioning, that you are this and nothing can change. And we're humans, we are adaptive, we can evolve and we can learn new skills, and we can change our behaviours and our thought processes and our feelings and how we are responding in the world. But it's not just a simple, straightforward thing, and it takes compassion and tolerance, and it's something, especially at the minute, I mean, it's obviously been amplified by the global situation that we've got, where people's anxieties have been heightened, so they're protecting themselves more and therefore again are less compassionate towards other people's responses to them. But I generally think there's a reason for that when these things happen for us, they are to highlight issues within ourselves, and then we can then take responsibility and try and find healing. Seeking professional help, again, especially I'm in the UK and we have an NHS system, and it's very, very limited and very, very difficult to get any sort of real mental health support, or it was for me. Certainly is in the area that we live. And people who haven't been stuck in this cycle, or who haven't actually had to rely on a service like that for support, just assume that support is available, and it's not. It's really difficult. Like, sometimes I've had to wait 6 months for an appointment, and then after that 6 months they're like, are you sure you want an appointment? You know, we're really busy, and you know, because that's triggering, I push them back, and it's really difficult to get support. And the other side of that is, even the support that is available is based on, in my opinion, victim blaming. So because there's not as much understanding of trauma and how it's actually really affecting people, like, so depression for me, I think I've discussed before, is a symptom, anxiety is a symptom, and they're trying to treat people for that without looking at the root cause. 6 sessions of counselling, you know, if you've had a lifetime of abuse, is not going to solve the symptom of depression, but that's all that's offered. So that cycle perpetuates the the issues in people, and then they feel frustrated that they can't, or I did, I'm sorry, I'm talking for the people I don't like that. I felt at times when I reached out for support really frustrated that I didn't actually get any. It was almost like, it felt to me like a pretense, you know. Some of the advice I had from counsellors in the past was absolutely, like, when I think back now, terrible. It's like they don't even understand trauma and the depth of it and how to overcome and process it. So it's very one-sided for me, some of the support that's available. Now, there is also some brilliant support out there, and it can be, you know, it can be, again, there might be weakness, can be hard to find. And yeah, finding the appropriate support as well is, it's not as easy as it might seem. And it's vital, actually. I would say for me, the only real time that having professional help helped was when I knew what the issue was, had to be dealt with. So once I literally had to move myself out of a space of, I need help, like victimhood, I need you to help me, I need you to fix me, and I couldn't actually deal with the root causes. So I wanted them to just fix the symptoms, but I didn't actually want to deal with the root causes. And it wasn't until I was able to do my own process to go, this is the root cause of a majority of problems or symptoms, the things that were going on in my life that I had to try and heal from, that I was able to then get the exact professional help that I needed for that cause, if that makes sense. So some counselling sessions I'd went to, you know, it was like, oh, well, talk about the problems going on in your life, like today, as if dealing with that is helpful, and it's not. In one way it is, because you're learning to manage skills that are affecting you day to day, but actually, after my whole process of healing, if I had just had one professional that went, we need to figure out what the root of all of your symptoms are and deal with that, and we're going to help you work through that until it's, you know, healed. That was what I really wanted, because I didn't understand myself then. I didn't have the strength to be able to, I had proper vocal blocks because of my personal experiences when, like, you know, I literally could not talk about it. So just, I kind of wanted to, but I couldn't. So I would say, oh, well, this is my problem. And then I'd go to counselling and they'd be like, well, what do you want to talk about? And I'm like, well, I've actually got, in my head, serious blocks. I can't talk about what I want to talk about. And they never asked questions. Like, they never just asked direct questions, which is why that's really important in the healing cycle. And it's something I've talked about before, is asking yourself direct questions. Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Like an annoying kid. Why? Until you get down to your nitty gritty. Because essentially, once you get down to the nitty gritty nuggets, and there might be several of them, but then you know what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with the surface issues, which is generally what's presented as the NHS. Like, the NHS in this country is a symptom management service. Very rarely is trying to get to the root cause, because essentially it wants to get people functional and working rather than fully healed. And there's all sorts of reasons why I believe that, and that is my truth, and I'll stand by it because that's my experience with it. So yeah, what I want to say is, there's also something around boundaries as well. Like, for me, I didn't have any boundaries. And then when I first had an experience to realise that I could kind of set them and insert them, it did cause issues and difficulties. And I didn't really respect other people's boundaries. So I found it really triggering almost when I was wanting to, you know, I felt like I had to express, or I was having a trigger response, and they just backing off. And they're like, no, I don't, you know, want to deal with that. Sometimes not even seeing it, just disappearing. So there's like a lot of work around boundaries potentially that needs to be done, but I don't think it's as much of an issue if we can understand that all of it's symptomatic and getting to the root cause of the issues. And every single one of us is responsible for that. You know, people with trauma are not, like I say, they're created, trauma's created, and it's a natural part of life. It's part of our evolution process, so it's needed. And our lack of tolerance acceptance and understanding for people displaying trauma symptoms, which will be people that fall into the category of addicts, criminals, antisocial people, argumentative people, narcissists, codependent, you know, all these labels we keep giving to people to be like, you're a bad person. It all will stem from trauma. And actually what they need is compassion and understanding. And yes, okay, sometimes people don't want to heal, like they're so invested in protecting that trauma, they won't. And yeah, you're right, like it's right that you need to set boundaries and protect yourself from that person. But from a perspective of compassion and knowing that that person has probably gone through really horrid stuff alone. And I think when we can really start to nurture the victim in ourselves and realise it's not our fault when trauma happens, it's not our fault the symptoms we're having, it's not our fault when you know, having conflict because of them symptoms, but at the same time taking responsibility that you can change it. But it's going to be difficult. And for me, if I could go back 10 years and speak to my, you know, past self, that would be the advice I would give to myself is, look, deal with the root issue, deal with, I mean, obviously I know what my root issues were now, deal with that and the rest kind of falls away. Yeah, I feel like that's maybe all I wanted to get off my, just get out into the world. Yeah, thank you very much for listening. I really appreciate it, and I hope it's been potentially helpful. And good luck on your trauma journey. Like, it's difficult, it can be, but it can also be life-changing and worth it. And I genuinely believe if we can really start to understand trauma and not label people and not judge people and certainly not condemn people for their trauma symptoms, we can actually start creating a world where we can have harmony and we can find some sort of level of peaceful coexistence with us within, you know, the planet. Yeah, thank you very much for watching, and if you like the video, please do like it and subscribe, and take care.